In 1985, the Bradford City fire shook the footballing world in one of the deadliest accidents to ever occur at a football ground, leaving an indelible mark on football fans across the globe. This video uncovers the causes of the fire and the aftermath of the accident. But before we proceed further, this video contains some footage that some viewers may find disturbing, so viewer discretion is advised. Bradford City are a football team playing in the English Football League. The club play matches at Valley Parade, also known as the University of Bradford Stadium. The stadium was built in 1886, initially as the home for Manningham Rugby Football Club, but in 1903 the club changed codes from rugby football to association football and became known as Bradford City Football Club. In 1908, the famous architect Archibald Leach, who designed many football stadiums, was commissioned to redevelop the ground, and afterwards it remained largely unchanged until the fire. It included a main stand which seated 5,300 fans. The wooden stand was constructed on the side of a hill, and all the entrances to the stand were at the rear. The roof of the stand was covered in highly flammable bituminous roofing felt. In 1985, Bradford City were playing in Division 3 of the Football League, and had just won promotion to Division 2 as champions. On 11th of May 1985, Bradford City were playing Lincoln City in the final game of the season. 11,000 joyful fans, twice as many as their usual gate, packed the ground with 3,000 people in the main stand. It was intended to be the last game for the main stand, which was scheduled to be pulled down and a new steel stand erected the following summer. The Bradford City captain, Peter Jackson, was presented with the league trophy just before the game, and the match then kicked off. It was a rather drab affair, with the scores remaining at 0-0 until 5 minutes before half-time. The first time that the fans had an inkling that something was wrong was when people started encroaching onto the pitch. A small fire had started towards the rear of one end of the main stand. It started off small, but was starting to grow rapidly. A police officer called on his radio for a fire extinguisher, as there were none available in the stand because they had previously been removed due to vandalism by fans. But his message was misheard and a fire engine was called instead. The fire began to spread, catching the end of the stand. The flames flickered upwards towards the roof of the stand. That highly flammable roof, covered with bituminous roofing felt, which was a ticking time bomb. And the bomb was just about to go off. The fire spread rapidly along the roof of the stand. Spectators struggled to climb over walls at the front of the stand to get onto the pitch, and the fire kept on spreading. More and more spectators spilled onto the pitch, but some fans appeared oblivious to the tragedy that was unfolding in front of them. Still in celebratory mood, some fans danced in front of the TV cameras that were meant to be there to capture the celebrations, but instead were recording a disaster. Black plumes of noxious smoke billowed up above the ground that could be seen from miles around. Police tried valiantly to rescue people from the stand, including this officer whose hair caught fire. Debris rained down, and people escaping from the blaze collapsed onto the pitch in exhaustion. It took just 4 minutes for the whole stand to be engulfed in flames. Fans and police tried to help as many as they could, but were being beaten back by the heat and fire. One spectator emerged from the inferno covered in flames, and the police and fans tried desperately to put them out. Unfortunately, this poor man died later from his injuries. With the whole stand now one massive fireball, no further people were rescued from the structure. Despite the best efforts of the police, fans and emergency services, 56 spectators lost their lives in the fire, and at least 265 were injured. Many of the fans tried to get out of the turnstiles at the rear of the stand, but they were locked and no staff were available to open them. Due to the construction of the stand on a hillside, the only official entrance and exits were via the turnstiles at the rear of the stand. And it was in this area where the fire, heat and smoke was at its worst. It took some time for the fire brigade to bring the fire under control, and even more time for the heat to subside to start evaluating the extent of the tragedy. When the fire eventually subsided and the emergency services were able to move the debris, many bodies were found, charred beyond recognition. The layout of the stand also made it difficult for people to go forward onto the pitch. There was a 5-foot wall separating the seating in the stand from the lower terracing area, and another 5-foot advertising hoarding which separated the terrace from the football pitch. Thankfully, no fences were erected at the front of the stand, which was commonplace at many grounds of this era due to the threat of hooligans. Otherwise the death toll would have been even higher. An inquiry was set up following the accident, led by the High Court Judge Mr. Justice Popplewell. It established that the likely cause of the accident was a cigarette falling between the floorboards of the wooden stand. Rubbish had been building up below the stands for many years, something which the Yorkshire Fire Brigade had warned the club about previously, saying, "The timber construction is a fire hazard, and in particular there is a build-up of combustible materials in the voids beneath the seats. A carelessly discarded cigarette could give rise to a fire risk." However, nobody from the authorities ever followed up this prophetic statement. For 30 years, the identity of the person who dropped that cigarette was unknown to the general public, but police officers believed that Eric Bennett, a British expat in Australia who was visiting Bradford with his nephew, dropped that fateful cigarette. It ignited the rubbish below the stand, and Eric reportedly tried to put out the fire with a cup of coffee, but this was futile. A tragic chain of events had already been put into place. The courts eventually found the football club and the fire authority jointly responsible for the tragedy. In total, more than £20 million was paid in compensation to the families of the bereaved and injured, and also police officers who were on duty at the game. At the time, it was the largest civil action ever brought in Britain. However, no criminal charges were brought against anybody. The accident, along with the Hillsborough disaster 4 years later in Sheffield, which claimed the lives of 97 fans, led to a massive overhaul of stadium safety in the UK. All-seater stadiums are now required in the top 2 divisions of English football. New wooden stands are now banned in the UK, and no smoking is allowed where there are existing wooden stands. But all of this came too late to save the 56 souls whose joy turned to disaster and never came home. And that concludes the story of the Bradford City Fire. If you found this interesting, please like and subscribe, and leave comments on what you think about this accident. Thank you for watching.